So the first agenda item is the withdrawal and set aside to the DOT for their maintenance base yard. So as I mentioned, the tax map keys 34416, portion of 3, it is 2.9 acres, and it will be set aside to the Department of Transportation for a centrally located maintenance base yard to efficiently operate and maintain the Daniel K. Inouye Highway, also known as Saddle Road. And this was the one that was approved by the board April 26, 2019.
For the public hearing.
For the public hearing. So the Saddle Road realignment project was a partnership of federal and state agencies to upgrade and modernize Saddle Road from milepost 6 in South Hilo to the junction with Mamalahoa Highway in South Kohala to provide safe and efficient travel between East and West Hawaii, a distance of approximately 52 miles. Without a strategically located maintenance base yard, the highway crews will be required to transport all equipment, vehicles, and machinery from the Hilo base yard on a daily basis. This would reduce productivity by about 30%. A centrally base yard will allow crews to report directly to the Saddle Road base yard and also allow workers to be drawn from both sides of the island, rather than just utilizing the East Hawaii crews from the Hilo base yard, where they would have to report to mobilize all the equipment needed for the day. There are existing structures, as you can see up there. The site will be at the obsolete Nene captive breeding facility, and there will also be construction of, construction of a road maintenance facility with an office building, equipment garage, material and tool storage facilities, fuel dispensing facility, equipment washdown facility, a septic system, and other related site improvements. Access to this site will be from Saddle Road at the existing entrance to the Gilbert Kahele Recreation Area. So, are there any questions regarding this agenda item before we get to testimony?
You say set aside. What does that mean?
It's a good question. So we kind of use the word set aside and designate interchangeably. So right now that land is set aside to the Department of Land and Natural Resources as a forest reserve. And so that set aside is as a forest reserve. The withdrawal would remove it from that set aside and then give it to the Department of Transportation, so it would become their management responsibility instead of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. And that set aside to DOT would be for facilities.
So the DLNR still controls the land. Technically, it's still under DLNR authority. Set aside does not mean transferring title, or?
So, title, it's all under the title of the state of Hawaii, so it's just transferring jurisdiction. So the withdrawal would mean that it would be removed from Department of Land and Natural Resources, and Department of Transportation would be the one who would be responsible for managing it going forward. And just so that we make sure we say to that 5 minutes.
Yeah, it'll be less than that.
I'll run it for you, but just so you know that will be the.
Thank you. Roll call, the Kapakael, Beneficiary Trust Council, Moko, Keawe, waitlisters, representing about 9,000 right now, waiting. List keeps on growing. So my testimony on behalf today is the tax map key number you guys are presenting, 34-4-016-003, is basically on government lands. So when we talk about the government lands, the Beneficiary Trust Council, on behalf of the beneficiary waitlisters, our concern is DLNR is only a management agency from the 1959 obligation of the state. They're supposed to be managing our lands, and across those properties are Pohakuloa. Those Pohakuloa properties are being viewed by a judge as the state being neglectful, which is a breach of trust for the bombings and the cleanups that they haven't mandated and cleaned up. So with that being said, anything that the Department of Natural Land and Resources move forward in will be considered a very grave breach to some of our family members when these lands are set aside, like you said, as forestry. Those forestry lands are set aside for beneficiaries, for the betterment. And none of these lands are being used or developed for the betterment. So to be able to support something like this is very hard for our waitlisters to support any development on a property that's already identified and marked for the use of betterment, the Native Hawaiians. Mahalo for you guys' time. I know you guys put a lot of work and energy in this, but you guys have to see our state is in a national crisis right now with homelessness, health, education, and we need to focus in on developing the right parcels for the betterment. So mahalo for you guys' time, and we cannot support Port with this. Mahalo.
I'm Jim Albertini with the organization Malu Aina. My testimony is more concerned with the park side of things, but since they're adjacent to each other, I'll give some comments on this. And let me start by saying we're talking about land across the street from Pohakuloa. This is a $1,000 certified calibrated radiation monitor. And on May 29th, 2007, when they were having the dedication of the Saddle Road, since this area is a base yard for Saddle Road maintenance, with Dananoy and a lot of other people up there, there was a large protest, 50 to 100 people I think there, and we had several of these calibrated monitors. And we picked up, the winds were coming that day, strong winds out of the south, right toward the park. And we picked up radiation readings 4 to 5 times the background level. And 3 months after these readings, in August of 2007, the military officially confirmed what they had denied for years, that they've used depleted uranium radiation weapons on Pohakuloa. We knew that. We knew something was coming off the base that day with our calibrated, certified radiation monitors. How much is in question? From a half a ton to a ton of this depleted uranium to perhaps many, many tons of it. Now let me make just a simple explanation. It applies to the base yard. I heard wash facilities and everything else. When that metal is there on the base, that's not a problem. But they've been bombing that area where they started to use this depleted uranium in 1960. They've been bombing it for 75 years. When high explosive hits that metal, it turns into depleted uranium oxide particles and can be traveled long distances by the wind. And the smallest particles, if you inhale it, according to Dr. Lorne Pang, 24 years Army Medical Corps, MD, he said it's the most deadly form of radiation. Not only does it cause cancer and other kind of health problems in various organs of the body, the worst part, it causes genetic damage that can be passed on for future generations. So this is the issue here. I remember when the county was transferring the park, and maybe when the state transferred the park management to that, I'll deal with that later, but county took over all responsibilities, liabilities. I assume the same is true here. The state of Hawaii Transportation Department is going to be liable for. Now the public doesn't go into that area, so it's not as much a concern as the park issue. But I think the same issue is basically at heart. Are you transferring radioactive contaminated land? And is it a public health hazard? Are we, 20 years from now, are we going to find the statistics like Agent Orange after years of denial that it caused public health harm? Are we going to find problems there? So I think the state, and of course when the issue of the park and the county side, there's liability questions. And we need to deal with that. So I'll save more comments to the park side of things, since that's my more public concern, is the issue of children and others playing in the park, using the cabins, more than the base yard, although contamination is contamination, it's a problem. And what I would propose is that the state needs to do, and the county needs to do, according to Dr. Pang and Dr. Mike Reimer, retired nuclear geologist, what they're saying needs to be done up there at Pohakuloa is ring that base with 24/7, air filter monitors for a year. Now, the military's stonewalling us on that, but we can do it on the park. We can set up air monitoring facilities. To pick up radiation with this machine, it's like hitting a needle in a haystack. What we really need is comprehensive soil testing and also air filtration with the proper micron-sized particles that will pick up depleted uranium over an extended period of time, 6 months to a year, depending on where the wind's blowing things around. So I'll raise more of these points, I guess, when it comes to the park side. Is my time about up?
25 seconds.
Oh, 25 seconds. So thanks for allowing me to raise these concerns. I'll share more on the park side of things.
32.572 acres from the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve. The board approved the proposed withdrawal at its meeting on March 28, 2014. The subject land is part of the Gilbert Kahele Recreation Area, formerly known as the Mauna Kea State Recreation Area and the Mauna Kea Recreation Area. The lands are currently designated as part of the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve. In 2010, the county, through Mayor Billy Kinoy, approached DLNR about transferring management of the rec area to the county, asserting that it could operate and manage the park more efficiently with improved service to the park's facilities. At the time, it was known as Mauna Kea State Recreation Area and was operated and managed by DLNR Division of State Parks. State Parks continued to operate and manage the rec area until 2014. The County of Hawaii was issued a special use permit from DLNR, allowing the county to take over management and operation of the rec area and enter the subject lands for maintenance and renovation purposes. The county has completed improvements and continues to manage the land under an SUP, special use permit. DOFA has adjacent facilities such as cabins, nursery, and storage area, and the Division of Conservation and Resource Enforcement, or DOCARE, also has a cabin and storage area adjacent to the park. This formal withdrawal will complete the transfer of management and land areas from Mauna Kea Forest Reserve to the County of Hawaii.
The title stays with the state, but only management is transferred over.
That's right.
So in the case that Mr. Albertini raised about liability, who will be liable if a suit is brought against the park for the health hazard for example, DU, for affecting a child or a pregnant woman? Who would be liable then?
It's a
Question for the Attorney General.
Yeah.
But-
Between the county and
but-
the state.
It has to do with, you know, if you agree with the transfer, are you agreeing with accepting the liability? See, I think the county gotta take it seriously, right?
think about that.
Before it happens, because you're inheriting something you don't expect, right?
Yeah.
So
And now we have
maybe the corporation council gotta get involved and realize are they accepting liability, or is it still with the Attorney General's office? It's still state.
Yeah, so the issues over liability would have to be worked out between the Attorney Generals and then the Corporation Council with the county. And it will probably end up in some sort of formalized document about that, but I don't know how that negotiation would end up going at this point, we don't know.
We were actually ordered by our Attorney General's office to do it before it was even transferred to the county, because our rules and state parks rules conflicted. And so you had two sets of rules. It was never removed from the Forest Reserve, so there were two sets of rules governing the same land, it's a legal nightmare for if something were to happen. So they directed us to find what what state parks were still within forest reserves, and we're in the process of removing those as well.
So it seems like the county gonna get you're gonna be legally liable.
That's for the lawyers to figure out.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to answer that.
Should those kind of details be available about the rules, how they were under forestry versus how they're under what, the title now?
So they're in the Forest Reserve System right now, so they're governed by those rules, but they're also set aside as in the Division of State Parks as a park, right? And so they do have some conflicting rules, and then so there's some issues about how enforcement is done and what's allowed in that area.
So state park rules will still apply even though the county is
No.
managing?
Because it won't be,
County
it
has their
won't,
own.
yeah, it won't be a state parking, it's not a state parking.
Okay, but that happened when it was transferred under management before, right?
Yeah.
2014, whatever the date was, became under the county.
But because it's still designated as forest reserve, our rules still apply to the property, which restricts them from certain activities as well.
The County of Hawaii.
Yeah, which restricts the county from certain activities.
Like what?
They wouldn't be able to rent out the cabins, which is the intent of the park, without a commercial permit, basically.
From
us.
department,
So
yeah.
right now, that's-
Our organization, Mauna, we're listed as a 106 consulting party, and we got a document in December and January this year about Mauna Kea Recreation Area and how it was going to be used by the military for special ops assassination training.
The park wasn't going to be used for that.
Well, I'm telling you, I have it in black and white.
My understanding it was the state facilities behind.
I remember it verbatim. I read the document. What it was, at night, 50 troops were going to march out of Puakaloa, across the highway, go up on the slopes of Mauna Kea and set up camouflage surveillance. During the day, I forget the exact number, 8 or 10, plain clothes enemy combatants would be mingling with park participants. And the job of the surveillance people was to try to pick out who the enemy combatants were mingling with the park participants. Now the key thing is, these enemy combatants were going to be armed. They were going to have blanks in their weapons, but they were going to have real weapons. Now I raised hell about this. I went in to see Harry Kim at Parks and Recreation. We got it canceled. I said, what do you think of a father pushing his kid on the swing and he sees somebody with a gun? It could have been a very provocative thing given the climate of violence. It was nuts. I don't know how that even got to first base, that plan. But the thing I want to bring up to DLR right now is that was just one of many special ops, they're called, planned not only for this island, but every island throughout the state. On this island, it's the coastal areas, North and South Kohala, near shore waters and shorelines. And on Oahu, they do a big rectangle around the entire island.
So if you want to provide this as part of your testimony, we're not at that point right now, but we can answer any questions that you guys might have. And there's nothing I can
My
provide
question
about
is
that.
this. I called at least a half a dozen high-ranking people in DLNR on this island, even Suzanne Case's office. They were unaware of these special ops, not only being planned for Mauna Kea Park, but all over the state. Somebody's asleep at the switch. DLNR should be standing up for the public to protect our nearshore waters or shorelines from military intrusion and our parks from being used as special ops assassination training. I find it to be a disgrace.
Thank you for sharing.
First of all, I have nothing against, I'm opposed to this, and I'll explain why. First of all, I have nothing against Gil Kahele. I knew him very well. In fact, I was on the Democratic Party Selection Committee that helped get him appointed to the Senate when Andy Levin resigned, I guess, to work for Mayor Kim's first term, I think it was. So I know Gil Kahele. I've been a farmer for 40 years. He used to buy kalo and bananas and things from our place. So Gil Kahele is a good man. But let me make this point. We talked about the transfer to the county, 210, 214. I wrote Billy Kanoy an email then. I read the document on the transfer, and it specifically had in that document that the county would accept all liability for that park. And I raised to him, like I told you folks here, the radiation concerns. And I said to Billy, Billy, you should have that park tested, soil tested, air testing for radiation contamination. Never got a response back from them. I don't think any testing has ever been done by the county on that. But it still stands today. So I'm opposed to it until that kind of testing is done. Again, proper air filters and soil testing done by, let me just say this, done by scientific experts. I would recommend that Dr. Lauren Pang, who's the Maui County Public Health Officer, but he has a place in Volcano. As I mentioned, he's 24 years Army Medical Corps. Lauren's an MD, Masters of Public Health. Dr. Mike Reimer, retired nuclear geologist. They should be involved in designing the studies that should be done for this park. We need the confidence of the community. We don't trust the military, what the military has done. They have too much of a vested interest in this to keep the military training going. We need independent, comprehensive testing and monitoring to determine the full extent of the contamination at my buddy Gilcaheli Recreation Area. Because that park, to the county's credit, it's been much improved. It's much cleaner. There's a playground for the kids. It used to be a mess when it was under the sun. But more people are using the park, and therefore we need to make sure the public health and safety is protected. So until that comprehensive testing and monitoring, air filters as well as soil sampling is done, I cannot support any further activity on that. In fact, I call that park, that's Radiation Park. Gilcaheli Radiation Park. Because that's where we picked up the high radiation readings there. And the day of the Saddle Road testing. So something needs to be done. The county needs to take action. I hope you take a precedent to Harry Kim. Then we can talk about going forward.
Next on the list is Ron Fujiyoshi. Is that correct? Your last name?
Yes, Fujiyoshi.
Please state your name.
My name is Ronald Fujiyoshi. I'm the treasurer of Ohana Ho'opakele, a not-for-profit Hawaiian organization, and also the retired pastor of Ola'a First Hawaiian Church Congregational, which is part of the United Church of Christ Hawaii Conference. I wanted to raise two things because I'm not sure whether the question period is also recorded. Is it recorded? So is it the same thing as being the testimony?
So the question period is being recorded, but the testimony will be provided to the owner.
Okay. And the questions
Yeah.
will not.
That,
Yeah,
we're
okay,
planning
then,
on that
okay,
happening. No,
then
no.
let me reiterate on the first point that I tried to raise earlier, which is the liability. I don't remember the exact date. I think Mr. Albertini will remember, but Mr. Albertini, Ruth Aloha, and myself had a meeting with Mayor Kim in his office, I think year and a half ago, Jim?
Yeah, at least, yeah. In the
Yeah.
summer, 2 years.
And since Mayor Kim was the head of civil service, we raised the issue of depleted uranium oxide with him, and said that we had raised it with PTA many times, but they haven't come out openly talking about the dangers of depleted uranium. In fact, they claim that there's no danger to it. But we explained, as Mr. Albertini explained, Dr. Lauren Pang explaining the danger of DU oxide, which is not a hard DU, but when it explodes on the DU, it turns to oxide, it's breathed into the lungs, and that's what causes most damage, especially to young children and pregnant women. And so we explained the danger to Mayor Kim and said he should have the park surveyed so he can find out exactly what is the danger of depleted uranium oxide to people coming to the park. And so that's the basis of what we did. Now, I think especially because this is a liability issue, I'm not opposed or affirming the transfer, but I'm just raising the concerns, and I would suggest that the county make sure before any transfer is done that they find out whether they're going to be liable for any issue that public may raise, bringing a court against the health hazard of DU oxide against their children or pregnant women. So I think that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up. The second issue that I wanted to bring up is this is the Mahele book. Yeah. As most of you should know, especially those of you who work for the government, that the official land designation, the modern land designation, started with the Mahele. And so you had that in your thing that this is Kaohe 4, right? Now, in the Mahele book, Kaohe on page 31 is Ahupua'a of Hamakua. And this was government lands in the Mahele. So 1848, this was Mahele land. Now, prior to that land, it was Kamamalu, Victoria Kamamalu land. And she, of course, was like in Hawaiian, it's like the prime minister of the Kingdom of Hawaii, okay? So she gave it to the king, and he designated government lands. Now, my understanding is, this is the other issue I want to bring up is United States Public Law 103150, and I'm sure you know what this is. This was at the 100th anniversary of the overthrow on January 17, 1993. Congress passed this law to offer an apology to Native Hawaiians on behalf of the United States for the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Now, many of you may not have read it recently, so I just wanted to read one of the whereases on this to recall yours. It says, whereas the indigenous Hawaiian people never directly relinquished their claims to their inherent sovereignty as a people or over their national lands to the United States, either through their monarchy or through a plebiscite or referendum. So, under Mahele in 1848, this was government lands. Now, the person who told me was not a radical, was Elroy Osorio, who was a council member and then later became a real estate dealer. And he said every executive order after this is illegal, right? So you said that it was transferred to Forest Reserve in 1909, I think, was 6?
That was the establishment of the
Forest
Forest Reserve.
Reserve, right, by executive order.
Yeah, I
So-
think I want to let the timer went off for the 5 minutes, so
Okay.
if you could wrap up.
Okay, so I'm just saying that I think there is a clouded title on this land, and I think it should be clarified if you are aware that clouded title is now being transferred from one entity to another, right? And I think it should be stated clearly in your reference about this executive order that transferred the Forest Reserve, yeah, to now you saying it to the county. Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Hurt. I'm representing Big Island Bird Hunters. And we support the change, but we wish to ensure that current boundaries are adhered to so that we do not lose for all types of hunting groups and other users the access into and out of the public hunting areas, as well as when Army area opens up the leased lands and we're able to access that. Other than that, we support the change. we have no problem with it. Thank you.
Aloha kako, Yelkepakaeo, Beneficiary Trust Council, Mokokeawe, 7 districts. We cannot support this endeavors. Title switching from DLNR to the county would be a gross neglect on behalf of the fiduciary duties. Even though DLNR has shown massive breach of trust and they don't have a proper database for the counted crown or government lands, and it's well documented, we cannot allow any more transactions. No matter how good it is for our community, we cannot allow these transactions to go through at the moment because of the missing data and the land data that was never reported and never had a fact of finding to how much land has the DLNR used, leased, sold, and etc. And so the liability for the county is another issue. Dr. Lauren Pang is a very well-known individual in our communities and in the doctor field, and we highly suggest and recommend what Pastor Ron, the church, and our other Maluaina referenced. I think we need a comprehensive management plan for just doing the testing for those areas. The court case is finding that with a gross neglect across the street, this is a real liability because the fact of finding is that they have breached the trust and they couldn't manage the properties across adjacent to Gilbert Kahele's recreational area proposal. And so with that being said, just would like to elaborate on the Public Law 103-150, the apology where in the clause as whereas we had never relinquished any of our sovereignty over our lands and our nationals. And so with that, this illegal executive order, I think we need to review these things again, and the DLNR has to take more consideration about their role, because their role is to manage these parcels that not everybody presently who works for the department has failed, but the failure over the years is basically catching up with the department, and this is just a trickling effect of what's going to occur on every issue, that land change or proposal of executive orders to swap, whether from department to department. I think this is a very crucial time that we have to reevaluate DLNR and their records. So we cannot oppose, we have to oppose this, no transfer over to the county. The liability is too great, and the health issues are a main concern for our families. Mauna.
Just for the record, a couple brief points. One is that this depleted uranium. Oh yes, Jim Albertini of Maluaina. This depleted uranium that we're talking about, it has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. That's the age of the Earth, which means it's going to be around forever. And the firing range for the Davy Crockett nuclear weapons system, which were used spotting rounds containing depleted uranium, was located less than a mile from the park. So winds from the south come right off those firing range and the impact area toward the park. That's the most serious conditions. And not only did we pick up radiation readings on May 29th, that was the first, 2007, we picked up radiation readings well above background levels, many occasions since then. So, but our monitors, these are radiation monitors. These are not, that's the hitting the needle in the haystack. What's needed is soil testing and air filter monitoring for extended periods of time. So we please get that done, and I hope the county will take this back for action. I don't know who should do it, the county or the state. It seems the state should pay for it. Military should actually pay for it. Just one note the county officials will appreciate. $32 million per minute is spent on war in the United States. We should be able to get a few seconds of that war spending to do the testing for radiation at Gilkahele Recreation Area. A few seconds.
Is there anyone else?
Thank you, Ronald Fujiyoshi again. I just want to inform you that some of you may know that preliminary testing for DU oxide has been done by a PhD candidate by the name of Drake Logan, who works for CUNY, City University of New York. And she can, because she has the equipment to do the DU oxide, she can put together a budget of what it'll take to do testing at Mauna Kea Park. And I think because of her preliminary testing, it'll become a ballpark figure that would be reasonable that the county could do prior to getting it transferred to them. So then you can find out the dangers prior to the transfer anyway. That's some information you might want it. I think she already talked to Parks and Recreation about, yeah, so you know how to get in touch with them. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Just the county, please check out Resolution 639-08. This was a resolution passed by the County Council by a vote of 8-1 on July 2nd, 2008. Called for 8 action plans. The first one was the key one, stopping all live fire at Puakoloa until there's a complete assessment and cleanup of the depleted uranium. Because by continuing to bomb the area, it's burning that DU metal, turning it into DU oxide, and scattering it to the winds. So I urge the county, consult that. There was a second resolution passed within the month after that one, which I don't recall the exact number, but it named Dr. Lauren Pang as the official representative of the county to have the military work with Dr. Pang. They've completely ignored both of those resolutions. They haven't taken any of those action plans. And so you have to ask yourself the question, if the military had nothing to hide,
Everything postmarked by or sent via email no later than July 10th, 2019. Please mail to Forestry Program Manager, care of Division of Forestry and Wildlife, 1151 Punchbowl Street, room 325, Honolulu, Hawaii, 96813, or email to forestry@hawaii.gov. For future processes, after compiling your comments and all testimony received through July 10, 2019, DOFA will present a summary of public testimony, staff analysis, and recommendations for further actions to the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Based on public testimony, the Board of Land and Natural Resources will decide whether or not to proceed with the proposed change to the Forest Reserve System. Should the Board opt to proceed with the proposed changes, DLNR will send each item to the Governor for final approval via executive order. If the executive orders are signed by the Governor, these lands will be formally withdrawn from government forest reserve status, subject, however, to disapproval by the legislature by 2/3 vote of either the Senate or the House of Representatives, or by majority vote in both, in any regular or special session next following the date of the executive order. On behalf of the Board of Land and Natural Resources and the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, we thank you for your attendance. This public hearing is now adjourned at 6:57 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.